Welcome to Root Source, Israeli Jews teaching Christians worldwide. Hi, I'm Bob Odell, and with me today are Ken Quinn, Ilana Horowitz, and Gidon Ariel. Our program today is the spiritual implications of Israel's current battle with Hamas. This is a special broadcast of Root Source. You can obtain this broadcast and other materials from root-source.com. You can also share this link with your friends and tell them to sign up. We'd like to welcome all of our Christian viewers today. Blessings and shalom to all of you. You know, there's been so many news reports and so much coverage about the Israeli conflict in Gaza. But have you noticed that the biggest player in the current conflict remains somewhat behind the scenes? And yet his presence, God's presence, Hashem's presence, is felt by everyone, whether we like it or not. So that's the main subject today. We're going to move very quickly into the spiritual and moral implications of this battle. And while it would certainly be presumptuous of us to say that we expect to give a voice to God in this panel discussion, we'll at least attempt to think openly about possibilities for what God might be up to. As the psalmist has said, may the words of our mouth and the meditations of our heart be acceptable in your sight, O God. So let's introduce our panelists. Our first panelist is Ken Quinn. He has lived in Israel for 24 years. He is married with 2 young children. And Ken lives in Beersheba in southern Israel, which has been hit hard in the recent fighting against Hamas. Ken is an educator in high schools for both Israeli and American teens. He's also a part-time tour guide, and you can reach him on his email address for that. Welcome to the broadcast, Ken.
Hi, Bob. Thank you for having me.
How are you doing down there in Beersheba?
We're doing okay. We did not have any sirens today. We have had quite a number of sirens in the last several weeks, but my family and I are fine. Thank you for asking.
All right. Well, next we have Ilana Horowitz. She's a mom living in Ra'anana. That's a small city north of Tel Aviv. And Ilana, I'm going to interrupt myself here and say I think you probably just won the hearts of many of our audience by selecting the word mom as the first word you used to describe yourself. I think that's wonderful. So
that's
welcome.
who I am.
So
Thank you.
How are you doing up there in Ra'anana?
Yeah, thank God we're doing well. I am a mom. One of our older daughters is actually running a day camp at this time every morning. And she has the kids out in our garden, which has a bomb shelter right in the garden. So we're just, continuing our lives in a responsible way. Thank God.
And Ilana, when did you come to Israel?
I moved to Israel in 1987 as a student, and I remained here.
Great. Well, Ilana's husband is Rabbi David Horowitz, and he's the director of the Ra'anana Community Kollel. And I asked Ilana, what's the difference between a kollel and a Jewish school like a yeshiva? And she said that like a yeshiva, they offer Torah study classes, but a kollel goes beyond that by providing a wide array of Jewish education, and a kollel does it for the whole community, in other words, for men, women, and children. So welcome, Ilana.
Thank you.
Our final panelist is Gidon Ariel. Gidon is married and is the father of 5 children. He's also the CEO of Root Source. Gidon believes that many Christians and Jews are hearing today a divine wake-up call to engage with each other, and he founded Root Source to answer that call. His vision is knowledgeable Israeli Orthodox Jews teaching Christians around the world online about Jewish concepts, ideas, and thought to more deeply understand the roots of their faith in an informal and loving manner. Welcome, Gidon. How are you?
Thank God, Bob, Ken, and Ilana. Nice to be here today as well.
And Gidon, when did you come to Israel?
I've been here for about 36 years, last I counted.
So I'm Bob Odell, your moderator. I live in Austin, Texas, and I believe that we Christians are not done learning what it means to live the Christian life well. And since this January, when I joined up with Gidon to help him get his Root Source vision up and running, I have been surprised, and even more than surprised, astounded at how much common ground we have as Christians and Jews, and also how quickly I've been able to apply Jewish teaching to my own Christian walk to make my Christian faith deeper and reach higher in my love for God. So, as we listen to these Israeli Jews talk about some very difficult topics, I would challenge you as a Christian, even as I challenge myself, to listen to their answers at two levels. First, listen to what they have to say. And second, try to listen behind the words to what God might be saying to us as Christians. And if you hear something, email me. I'd love to hear your feedback. So let's get started. Our first question goes out to Gidon. Gidon, do you believe this whole conflict is an unfortunate situation that has spiraled out of control, or was it intentionally, willfully, even planned and provoked by Hamas?
Well, thanks, Bob. That's for us Israelis, I think that's a pretty obvious question, especially since some of the things that we've seen that have been clarified during these past few weeks of fighting. For example, the tunnels that some of the listeners might have heard about on the news. These are tunnels that were dug from deep within the Gaza Strip. Thanks very much. And they come out near or in Jewish communities just outside of the Gaza Strip. The story that's been running around the internet, and in fact has been quoted by Prime Minister Netanyahu himself, is that these tunnels were meant to be used on the Rosh Hashanah New Year holiday that's coming up the end of September. All together at the same time, some 30 tunnels that all of out of each one would jump a few dozen Hamas suicide terrorists, some killing some of the residents of these communities, and some being kidnapped deep into the Gaza Strip. This would have been a mega attack with hundreds of casualties that the likes of which Israel, in fact, the entire world has never even seen. So it seems that the Hamas was working up to such an event. The fact that immediately before the Tzuk Eitan Operation Protective Edge operation was held, we had, of course, it seems like ancient history, of course, but about a month ago, a little bit more than a month ago, 3 high school boys were kidnapped from the center of Israel, not far from Jerusalem, and Israel recognized that it was Hamas terrorists and their supporters who did that. So besides the rockets that were being fired little by little over the Gaza Strip, but these kidnappings also were a rationale for Israel to begin the Operation Protective Edge. So I think that Israel was seeing what was going on, decided to open the operation, and it certainly was not just a question of tit for tat. This was a planned operation by the Hamas, which instigated what Israel has been doing over the past 4 weeks or so.
So, Ken, this next question goes out to you. Hamas first started shooting rockets, and Hamas has rejected every ceasefire. So I don't think any of our listeners would say that Hamas is not to blame for the continued hostilities. But in your opinion, Ken, does Israel deserve any of the blame for this escalation?
No, I don't think it does. Hamas has done all that it can to injure and kill as many soldiers and civilians as possible. Israel is defending its citizens. Israel is doing everything in its ability to minimize civilian casualties on the other side. As everyone has heard and read on the, in the news, Hamas has purposely positioned civilians near rocket launchers, and thus, unfortunately, to our sorrow, innocent civilians have been killed. But no, Israel deserves no blame for the escalation. It is 100% the responsibility of Hamas.
So a lot of people see God as being involved in various ways in the current actions. For instance, there's been very few Israeli civilian casualties, even after having, I think I saw a report, over 2,800 rockets were fired in the month of July alone. Ilana, is God actively involved in protecting Israel, and how do you know?
God is definitely actively involved. One thing that happened is that when the nation was praying for the safe return of our kidnapped boys, we all hoped that Eyal, Gilad, and Naphtali would return alive. So we could wonder, where did all our prayers go? Now we realize how many prayers we needed in advance of this prolonged war. Our rabbis teach us that prayers never get lost. Perhaps we can attribute our very low casualty rate from missile attacks to the protection of these prayers in advance of the war. And let's think about the Iron Dome system. God does miracles, and it looks like the Iron Domes are simply doing the job. The Iron Dome is a human-made invention that allows God to act behind the guise of routine life. If God made miracles too obvious, people wouldn't have any choice in believing. And if we had no choice about believing in God, it would not have that same value. Some people thank the Iron Dome exclusively, but we believers see clearly that God is protecting Israel.
Thank you, Ilana. So, Gidon, let me turn to you and ask about a tough issue. It's the trade-off between Palestinian civilian casualties and, on the other hand, the protection of the IDF. You know, there must be decisions being made about how many IDF soldiers are going to be put at risk against how many casualties could happen in a given situation. I want to ask you about the balance between those two. Not necessarily how it's being balanced right now, but what do you think God's laws say about that? What do God's laws tell you about the right balance between IDF safety versus Palestinian civilian casualties?
Ken, Bob, earlier, a few moments ago, you put a slide that paralleled the casualties on Israel's side and the casualties on the Gaza side. You can pull up that if you can pull up that slide now, that would be very good. Yeah, that's what I was talking about. And this is, I think this is what you asked, and I am just incensed by this parallelism. I'm not mad at you, but just the entire media is just full of this parallelism, and there's nothing worse than this, because Israel is in fact engaging in this entire operation for one reason and one reason only, and that is to defend innocent citizens. While Gaza, the Hamas in Gaza are innocent one reason only, and that is to attack innocent citizens. And not only is Israel trying to defend the citizens in Israel, but we have absolutely no war with the civilians in Gaza either, the Arab-Palestinian civilians there. And by the same token, Hamas, while trying to kill and murder Israeli civilians with their rockets, they are actually trying to kill Gazan civilians, women, and children. The reason is, as you can see in this picture, the West sees this as an equivalence, and therefore, the more Gazan children that are killed, the more fingers are pointed to Israel for being the perpetrator. But in fact, it is the Gazans themselves, the Hamas terrorists themselves. So if you're asking what Israel has to do in order to minimize the civilian casualties on the Gaza side, and how much of the lives of the Israeli soldiers have to be perhaps taken into consideration one against the other, it's just the opposite. Israel sees life as the most holy thing. In fact, is a well-known phrase by Hamas leadership. As much as Israelis love life, we, the Hamas, love and sanctify death. So we are trying to beat Hamas from both sides of the war. We are trying to defend our citizens as well as theirs, while we are doing our best to eradicate the Hamas terrorist threat. And if there is collateral damage, that is not our fault, and is not something that we say, well, we're sorry, we didn't aim well, we do our best to aim. The problem is that the Hamas does its best to aim to make sure that we kill more of the Palestinian civilians in the Gaza Strip.
So there's another way to look at it, Gidon. What would you say about an argument that says, you know what, we need to keep our soldiers safe. We're not going to send them in nearly as much. We're gonna just blast with artillery. Is that morally justified before God?
I'm not. The question here, I don't see it. It's not something that that we're thinking about so much as far as morally justified before God. We're talking about the day after. How can Israel face the world? And if Israel, and I've got a lot of Facebook friends that in a moment of angst and horror and anger said, why don't you just nuke them all? Well, these people are not, they are caught in the crossfire. We cannot simply erase it all. If we could have done that, we could have done it a long time ago. That is why when people say that Israel's, when anti-Semites and Israel haters say that Israel is in this to kill as many innocents as they can, well, obviously, if we were trying to do that, then we would have been a lot further down the road doing that. Not just people who were in the area who would aim at that truthfully, but that's not what's going on. So again, the issue. I'm sorry that I'm not answering very clearly here. The issue of collateral damage, the issue of our soldiers' lives. These are issues that are dealt with at great length in the Israel Army Code of Ethics, and it's something that we here in Israel, everybody on left and right, thinks about all the time.
So let me just ask Ken. Ken, do you believe that Israel is doing all it can, or at least what is fully appropriate in reducing civilian casualties in Gaza?
I do. I believe that Israel is doing everything that it can not to hurt innocent civilians. They send leaflets. They send SMS messages. I think Israel is doing all that it can. I think that one thing that I have spoken about with friends is our sadness and anger at Hamas that they do not build bomb shelters for their civilians. If people of Hamas know that they're going to attack Israel, for their own citizens, they should build bomb shelters, which they do not do except for their own leadership. And I think that's criminal.
Okay, thank you, Ken. So let's move on to talk about the current conflict in the context of fairly modern history with respect to Gaza. So let's start with Ilana. Ilana, do you see God accomplishing purposes through this conflict?
Yes, I do. I've seen several purposes being accomplished. The first is that God desires unity among God's children. In the Bible, there were two generations that sinned and were punished as a result. The generation of the flood and the generation of the Tower of Babel. In the generation of the flood, the world was destroyed. And the generation of the Tower of Babel had their languages changed and they were forced to disperse throughout the world, but they were not destroyed. The difference was that the people of the generation of the Tower of Babel were united in their cause. Standing united is a protective edge from destruction. I am seeing a second purpose being accomplished in God bringing people together who need to be brought together. Friends of ours went to a hospital to visit wounded soldiers. One soldier has lost an eye and didn't want to talk to anyone. It happens to be, though we know that nothing just happens to be, that the 10-year-old boy in this visiting family had an eye removed when he was very young. This boy has a prosthetic eye that looks normal. He was able to engage the wounded soldier in conversation because of this commonality they share. This young boy was able to inspire the wounded Israeli soldier to hope for a happy future. And a third purpose I see happening is that God is helping those distant from God to come closer. The secular Israeli media is full of Jewish unity and faith in God at this time. I believe that every Israeli Jew is closer to God than he or she might realize in more tranquil times. I believe that every person isn't too far away at heart from God, and these purposes are clearly being accomplished at this time.
Thank you for that, Ilana. That is a great perspective. So let me turn to Ken and ask you this. If we go back and look at the decision Ariel Sharon made in 2005 to pull out of Gaza, it disturbed a lot of the religious community, certainly when he decided to do that. How did you feel about that at the time, and how do you feel about it now?
Bob, I supported it then, and I still support it now. I know it's not very popular maybe among certain people, what I'm saying, but I believe that it is the right thing to do. People forget that in exchange for Israel withdrawing from Gush Katif and Gaza, the president at the time, George Bush, gave Ariel Sharon and Israel a acknowledgement that Israel can retain 10% of our biblical homeland of Yehuda v'Shomron. And that also is important. Zionism, from its beginning, has always been a great believer in real politics. And I also believe that Rabbinic Judaism embraces real politics. And in our day and age, Israel has to make trade-offs. And I think it was Ariel Sharon and much of Israeli society decided that controlling the lives of almost 2 million Palestinians was not worth it, and it was not good from a financial standpoint, from a moral standpoint. The less control we have on Arabs is better. And so I thought at the time, and I still think it was worth an attempt to allow Palestinians to create some kind of a autonomous entity in which they govern themselves. Now, it is true that there have been problems since we withdrew, but I would argue there were problems when we were still there. And so Israel, we need to improve things. We need to improve our security, and I think the way to do that is to make sure that there will be no smuggling into Gaza of missiles, and the way to do that is to make sure that the borders are patrolled, possibly by international troops, at least on the Egyptian side. I don't know. Israel, that's one of the things they're going to ultimately they're going to negotiate, how to prevent what has happened in the last several years. But as a principle, I thought it was a good thing for Israel not to try to control the lives of almost 2 million Palestinians, and I still think it's a good thing.
So I'd like to ask Gadon that question. Were you against the pullout at the time? And why don't you answer that? And I'd like to follow up with a question about Ariel Sharon going into a coma. Go ahead.
Well, I was active at the time against the disengagement, and I still am today. And the people that I'm seeing on my Facebook feed, there are some people who are calling now for a return to certainly to the Jewish community in the Gaza Strip, and even to all of Gaza, for two reasons. First of all, the idea of a withdrawing from the Jewish homeland, even parts of it, is something that goes against the idea that this land was given to us as a gift by God. And when you say thanks but no thanks, God, then it seems to me that that you're being unappreciative, to say the least. As far as militarily and security-wise, while on the one hand it is inconvenient and certainly, to say the least, to be, as Ken mentioned, to be in charge of a million and a half Palestinian Arabs in Gaza, as we can, as reality shows us, the fact that they are now being run by the ghoulish terror regime of Hamas is much worse for them. I think that to just wash our hands from what is going on there is to these civilians is as far as we're concerned, it only allows more and more of these civilians to adopt a terrorist stance against us. So it's bad for us, but it's also bad for them. I know I'm in friends with a number of Palestinian Arabs on Twitter and Facebook who are saying we're angry at the Israelis for withdrawing from the Gaza Strip and allowing the Hamas terrorists to run amok. So I don't know God's plan how we are going to get back into Gaza, but I think that's only a matter of time, because to bring international troops into Gaza, again, is just against Israel's better interests, and to leave it the way it is now also. So we are stuck in a quagmire. I don't know how this is going to happen. That's a job for the government and for the Prime Minister. That's a job that I'm happy that I don't have.
So I've taking what you said and adding an additional question. Going back, if you look at 2005, Ariel Sharon made the decision. I think something like 1 month later, he went into a coma. I've heard even Christians speculate that him going into a coma could be a sign from God that he was being judged for that decision. What do you think?
I don't like to reveal what God has decided to keep secret. I think that there have been a lot of actors, talking about Israeli actors, in the issue of the disengagement, and some people are very happy to point out that this person died and this person went to jail and this person did all these things. I think that what's most important for us is to remember what our responsibilities are, what God has commanded us to follow His Torah, to behave properly between man and his fellow man, and what God decides, the punishments that God decides to mete out upon certain people, that's between God and those people. I am not the judge, God.
So let me turn to Ilana and ask you. Tell me, in your view, do you believe this war is about God forcing Israel to go back in and fix this mistake, or begin to fix the mistake of pulling out of Gaza?
Well, I would take Gideon's approach in saying that God didn't speak to us directly to tell us why this war had to happen specifically now. I know that in every situation we pray for God's direction to make the right choices. We pray that God guide the hearts and minds of our Prime Minister and Israel Defense Force leaders to make decisions that will benefit us the most. So you ask, is this war really about? Well, I think to myself, what is this war really about? And I think it's about what we make it be about. What I'm actually seeing all around is that Israelis are making this war be about unity and love and faith. I'm stunned to hear that wounded lone soldiers are saying they have, quote unquote, too many visitors. Families who are mourning for deceased soldiers say that too many people come to comfort them, and they say that too many supplies are sent for fighting soldiers. It's just an incredible amount of love and unity in Israel right now. People are sending our soldiers whatever supplies they can. When I went to the supermarket, I saw an empty shopping cart with a note requesting that shoppers drop items inside for our soldiers. An hour later, when I checked out, the shopping cart was 2/3 full. This has been going on for weeks. That wasn't one day. That's That's every day. And you know what IDF soldiers say they appreciate the most? They most appreciate supportive letters and drawings from children. There's even a woman named Tova who offered to print emails to the soldiers. You can send your children's drawings or a letter of support, and she prints it and has it delivered to them. There's a parent who wrote on Facebook, just got a call from a father of a soldier to thank us for the beautiful pictures and parcels we sent to Gaza. What a small world. We love you, IDF, and thank you. Some IDF soldiers actually took the time to make a short video clip to thank the kids who sent them drawings and letters. My friend sent me this email. In the line at Rami Levy, a supermarket, and the guy in front of me has 5 times more in his trolley than my mom has ever bought in one go. I say to him, you feeding a yeshiva or you just got a big family? He answers, I live down on the border of Gaza, and I don't know how many soldiers I have coming for Shabbat, but I'll feed as many as I can. My second assumption was correct. He has got a big family. I'll tell you something else. Only in Israel does your falafel lady demand a hug because she hasn't seen you since the war turned more serious. I'm talking about Orit and Mickey, who make the best falafel in Israel at 198 Achuza Street in my city, Ra'anana. My city, actually every Friday morning during this war, my city has held a public fair where merchants from the south of Israel come to sell their wares since business down south has been suffering. In the middle of the fair, people had to run for cover from a missile attack. Yet residents keep supporting these businesses so that merchants from southern Israel will suffer a little less. Is there any way Israelis won't help? There are even therapeutic painting events sponsored for mothers and wives of soldiers in Gaza. Israelis have shown so much caring for their children. The children's library in my city invested in making its secure area kid-friendly and inviting so that the kids won't panic and will remain calm during a siren alert. There are also songs that were written specifically to help children cope with having to take cover when they hear a siren. Talking about our children brings up a question that actually bothers me. As a mom, I wonder whether it's possible for our kids to grow up psychologically healthy after experiencing what they do. My 13-year-old daughter and some friends were lounging on the grass in the Rose Garden, which is a beautiful park opposite the Knesset building, when they looked up to see a rocket zooming across the sky. They heard a faint siren, which they realized was not meant for them. It was meant for a nearby area. The teenagers were a little shaken up, but then they went to one of the girls' houses to continue their reunion indoors. When I heard that from my daughter, this incident made me think that our children can actually process this war in a healthy way if we adults help them face their reality honestly and with faith. So one purpose in this war may be God challenging us to parent our children with honesty and faith. Those are the purposes that I, as a mom, see happening in this war.
Thank you, Ilana. And I think with that, let's move to talk about the future. In fact, I'm going to start with you, Ilana. Some rabbis have written that they see Hamas in the same way that Israel saw the Amalekites, and that God commands that the Amalekites would be completely and utterly destroyed. Would you go that far with Hamas?
I live on a street named after a famous rabbi called the Chafetz Chaim. It was said about the Chafetz Chaim that he could read a person's facial structure for signs of descending from Amalek. For that reason, whenever someone unfamiliar came to visit him, the Chafetz Chaim made sure not to look at his face too closely because he did not want to put himself into the position of being obligated to destroy that person. We aren't looking to kill human beings. We don't want to destroy nations. The Israel Defense Forces act in self-defense from proven terrorism. That's my feeling about that question.
Thank you very much. So, Ken, we can all imagine some very convincing outcomes in Gaza that could end this conflict. But I'd like to ask you, what's the minimum favorable outcome that you would need to see before you could be comfortable that the fighting ceases?
I would need to be ensured that there's no smuggling into Gaza from Egypt or from the sea of missiles. I would need, because that preceded this current conflict, so I would need to be sure that would not happen again. And they need to look at a realistic future for that region. And it very well may be with Hamas out of the equation. And we'll see as things progress. But I guess to answer your question, the minimum to make sure there would be no smuggling and that there would be no future attacks coming from Hamas onto Israel. That would be, and I am confident that my government will be able to work that out in the weeks and months to come.
So thank you. Gidon, how much longer do you think this campaign is going to go
on? It's a little bit hard to say because over the past month or so, every few days it sounded like we're about to reach a ceasefire. And in fact, there have been over a half dozen ceasefires, humanitarian ones they were called, but each and every one of them, the Hamas terrorists were unable to hold themselves back, and they attacked us in the middle. The last I heard, Prime Minister Netanyahu and the Security Defense Minister Ya'alon said that we will continue until all of our goals and targets are achieved. I'm afraid that Ken's hope that this operation will only be done when there will be no opportunity. He didn't even say opportunity. That simply that it will not happen. That Hamas will attack Israel anymore because they don't have anything to attack with. For that, you'd need. It won't be enough that Egypt is a signatory to that ceasefire because today Egypt is against Hamas, but who knows what's going to happen tomorrow. And Iran and Qatar are also supporters and suppliers of Hamas. Not to mention the Hamas themselves, in their charter, they clearly state that the destruction of the state of Israel and of the Jewish people is their goal. So I don't think that we're going to be able to finish this current operation only when all of those threats are obliterated. I think we're going to have to settle for less than that. But I do think that we are getting close to the destruction of the current tunnels. What they're talking about on the radio, the current terrorist tunnels, of course, and what they're talking about on the radio is that there are about 3,000 rockets still live in Gaza. So I think that to destroy all of those might take us another week or two. So it's possible that we're looking at something like that. I'm guessing that this entire operation will be done within a week and a half by August 15th.
Well, thanks for that prediction, and we certainly do pray that that is the case. Alana, I'd just like to ask you one question from a very Christian perspective. We're often thinking about the signs of the times and where we are in that. Do you see this conflict, is this conflict a sign that the Messiah is coming, is right around the corner? From your perspective, how do you see that?
I think it is. We have a teaching that our holy temple was destroyed because we lacked unity. We're seeing so much unity today that, yes, I see it as a sign that the time of the Mashiach is near. I can't predict exactly how near, but I feel that it's near, yes.
Well, thank you. So let's, as we wrap up here, let's ask a couple of questions. I've got a question I want to ask to each one of you, starting with Ken. what would you tell your good friends, your good Christian friends, let's say? Would you say we should come, would you tell us to come tour Israel right
Absolutely, and take me as a tour guide.
I guess that was a softball.
Absolutely, come.
Okay. Ilana?
Yes. We just don't want to have to worry about you. If you come prepared knowing how to take cover from rockets, we would appreciate your solidarity, and we welcome you very happily. And please come join me for a falafel at Orita Nikki's place at 198 Azusa Street in Ra'anana. They make the best falafel in Israel. You can't miss it.
Okay. And Gadon?
It would be amazed if you would be able to find an Israeli who says that now is not a good time to come to visit Israel. The people who are visiting that I see, and I see plenty of people visiting, all say that they are most happy to be here at this time, because really life isn't about just sitting on a bed all your life long and eating a bowl of cherries. Life is the experiences that you have. And as we've discussed in today's program about the miracles that we've seen, I think that certainly our Christian audience, people here, would be interested in seeing God's intervention in not only their own personal lives, but in the lives of God's people, the Jewish people living in God's land, the land of Israel.
Thank you so much. And for our last question, we Christians do like to pray for Israel. Not only are we commanded, but our hearts are drawn out to you and to what all of you are going through. I'd like to go around the panel and just ask you to pick one thing that you would like Christians to pray for. Let's start with you, Ken.
First of all, thank you. Thank you, Bob, and thank you to your Christian listeners for praying for us. And we feel it. And so the first thing is thank you so much. I would ask that you pray for peace and security of Israel and of Jews and Arabs, and that there should be peace between us, and that Israel should continue to prosper. I would ask that you pray for that, and thank you for your prayers.
Amen.
Thank you. Ilana?
It's very interesting. When our kidnapped boys were missing, the mother of Naftali Frankel, Racheli Frankel, was praying at the Western Wall. Racheli is a teacher. A few of her young students approached her and told her that they were praying for Eyal, Gilad, and Naftali to return alive. Rachel responded by asking her students to promise her that if things turn out differently, not to be broken and to remain unified, because she said God is not our employee. In other words, we pray that God do what is best for us because only God knows what that is. Please pray that God remain close to us and act in our best interest in whatever way God sees fit to do that. May God grant wisdom to our Prime Minister and Israel's Defense Forces to make good decisions. There are also lists of names of injured soldiers that are updated regularly so that people can pray for their recovery. Even a light injury can require a lot of treatments and take many months to heal completely. Prayers for our soldiers are so important. Thank you.
Yes, and we included a web link to download a file that has the list of the injured soldiers' names written in English, so you can pray them phonetically. Also, Ilana mentioned earlier about a program to send supportive letters and drawings from children, and we've included the email address that she had mentioned earlier. So, Gadon, to you, pick one thing you want Christians to pray for.
Those are two hard acts to follow. I was very touched by both Ken's prayer and Ilana's prayer. And I was thinking about all of my Christian friends who I've seen over the years, over the internet. Every time I mention Israel, I get a few people saying, "Oh, I wish I could come there." And I think that connection for individuals to be in the Holy Land, in the land of Israel, I think that is really something that people have to pray for, that God will help them open their eyes and their wallets to see how they can actually come to Israel at this time and any time. Because for people saying I want to come to Israel for my whole life, this is the time to really make an effort to ask God for the strength for you to make that decision to come here, and with the peace and the unity that Ken and Ilana mentioned, I think that to really be connected to God's land and God's people is something that we should all pray for more and more today.
Well, I'd like to thank Ken, Ilana, and Gidon for your answers, your openness to share with us. Clearly, we're all on a journey to try to understand not only what is happening, but what God is doing, and I really appreciate your openness. We at Root Source hope that this special broadcast has whet your appetite to learn more from Israeli Jews. And in fact, Root Source is going to be announcing our first class on Jewish prayer very soon. So make sure you're on our announcement list at root-source.com. You can also follow us on Twitter. Well, that's it from me. I'd like to ask Gidon, do you have any final word for us?
You finished up very well there, Bob. Thank you very much, and I do hope that we will be able to make another one of these special broadcasts very soon. This time, talking about the peace that's been achieved in the land of Israel.
Thank you. Blessings and shalom.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you.